What's up peeps, this is Todd and welcome back to my show. Well, this is a video that I never ever, not in a million years thought I would make because it's controversial and it's going to be quite offensive. But when I started this YouTube channel, I never once told myself that I wanted to have the most likes or the biggest audience or be the most fun and popular. I told myself that I wanted to be the most transparent YouTuber in the history of YouTube. That means that out of roughly 7,000 languages, your boy only speaks facts. And by being honest and telling the truth and being very transparent, oftentimes it makes for offensive content. Something I will say right here, right now, that might offend a lot of my peers on YouTube is simply this. I will make well over $1 million this year, and no, I will not ever come out with a course, a get-rich course, teaching you how to make $1 million. Why is that, you ask? Because the vast majority of these get-rich courses that you can buy online are totally bullshit.
Knowledge.
That's also why that as a licensed insurance agent, as someone who is licensed to sell you every type of life insurance there is, I will never sell you whole life insurance because I think that whole life insurance is a bad financial product. So when I say things like most online courses are nonsense and whole life insurance by and large is a ripoff, that offends a lot of people. But I wouldn't be doing anyone any service if I didn't speak the truth. So today I'm going to talk about income inequality. I'm going to outline the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to talk about why some people might make more money than other people and why it's not as black and white to just say, oh, that's fair or that's unfair. So if that sounds good, let's hop into the video. So for anybody who may not know, this was in the news a while ago, there's a professional women's soccer player by the name of Megan Rapinoe. Now she used her platform to talk about income inequality in sports and was basically saying that it's unfair that male athletes make more than female athletes. There's a basketball player named Draymond Green, a male basketball player, that basically came out and said, hey, you ladies need to stop complaining, you should just be happy that you're here, and you still make good money, not as much money as us, but compared to people, that make 50 grand a year, you're still able to make a lot of money. Well, Megan Rapinoe did not take kindly to that jab by Draymond Green, and she just said that he is perpetuating stereotypes and contributing to this income inequality, and that women should be paid as much as the men for basically doing the same job. Now, let me first say in the very beginning, I wholeheartedly agree that if you have person A and person B and they're doing the exact same job, they should be paid the same, regardless of what their gender, race, gender identity, all that stuff, whatever. I think if they're doing the same exact job, they should make the same money. But the one thing that Megan Rapinoe failed to mention in her argument is she is fighting for equal pay, but she's not fighting for equal ticket sales, and that's a problem. The fact is, there are certain sports where male athletes draw a larger audience, and there are other sports where female athletes draw a larger audience. Now, Megan Rapinoe is a soccer player, and unfortunately, male soccer players draw a bigger audience. In other words, there are more people buying tickets to go see men play soccer. There are more people tuning in on TV to watch the male teams play. There are more people buying the male merchandise, like jerseys and whatever, from the male players, as opposed to people buying jerseys from the female players. Now, this could be because of the physical differences between men and women, like men run faster and jump higher, and we have about 3 times the upper body strength as the typical female. And maybe those physical differences actually contribute to why Megan Rapinoe's professional women's team lost to a teenage boys team a couple of years ago. Now, I will say right here, this wasn't like a sanctioned soccer match, it was a fun scrimmage, but nonetheless, a group of boys under the age of 15 actually beat the professional women's team in soccer. The problem with demanding equal pay is there isn't equal revenue. So in other words, male soccer players are able to make more money because more people are buying tickets to these male soccer games. Now, we can say that's unfair, and we can even say that's sexist, but in order for the women to be paid as much as men, we have to change the minds of everyone that they should tune in to women's soccer just as much as they tune into men's soccer. But there are sports where the female athletes draw a larger audience and are actually paid more. One of them is gymnastics, which is why probably everybody watching this video will recognize the face or the name Simone Biles, and you probably don't remember the name of any male gymnast. That is because, for whatever reason, female gymnastics draws a larger audience than male gymnastics, which means that female athletes, female gymnasts in that arena, they're going to make more money and have more opportunity than the male gymnasts because they have a much larger audience. Similarly, female figure skating is way bigger than male figure skating. Let's be honest, nobody gives a shit about male figure skaters, but people tune in to watch the women skate. Now again, we can talk about how this isn't fair. We can say, well, hey, you have a female skater or a female gymnast, and you compare that to a male skater or a male gymnast. Well, the man's doing the same exact job, he should make the same amount as the woman. The problem is, because the audience is smaller, the revenue is smaller, so the male gymnast is not going to make as much as the female gymnast. On that same token, let's talk about the NBA for a second. There was a meme floating around Twitter comparing LeBron James and Sue Bird. This meme was a side-by-side comparison that illustrated that both Sue Bird and LeBron James each had 17 seasons and had 4 championships. But then it compared their salary, and it talked about how Sue Bird only makes $215,000 a year. So of course, on the surface, this looks incredibly sexist and misogynistic. And if they have the same amount of experience and they have the same amount of championships, why on earth is LeBron James paid almost $40 million, but Sue Bird is paid just over $200,000? Well, here's the reason. The WNBA doesn't actually make any money. On the contrary, the WNBA loses $10 million per year on average, and it has lost $10 million a year since its inception in 1996. In fact, the only reason the WNBA exists is because revenue from the NBA actually goes to pay for the WNBA, which again loses money every single year. So check this out. The WNBA has lost an average of $10 million a year since 1996. At the time I'm recording this video, it's 2021. That means that the WNBA has lost about $10 million a year for the last 25 years, so that is $250 million that the WNBA has lost. And when you understand that, it's reasonable to say, well, hey, we actually can't pay Sue Bird more than $200,000 a year because the company that she works for, this organization, is losing money. This is a loss for us. I mean, think about for you guys, if you own 2 businesses and one business made you a ton of money that sort of paid for this other business you have, and that business was losing you $10 million a year, you'd probably call it quits on that business. The NBA hasn't done that. They haven't shut the doors on the WNBA. We're just saying we can't rationalize paying these athletes $40 million a year like the men make because the men's team generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue where the women's teams loses $10 million of revenue every single year. Now again, a case could be made that there is a problem here where the audiences are sexist. Why is it that people tune into the NBA, which generates revenue, and people do not turn into the WNBA, which doesn't generate revenue? An argument can be made that when it comes to football, basketball, soccer, baseball, we value men's sports more, and when it comes to gymnastics and figure skating, we value women's sports more, and that is unfair and we should change that. But again, in order to change that, you're going to have to change the mind of all of the sports fan, and you're going to have to demand that they tune into specific sports and not tune into other sports. One thing that people don't seem to care about at all is there is actually huge income inequality when it comes to modeling. Sean O'Pride is the top male model in the world, and he has an annual salary of about $1.5 million. However, Kendall Jenner is the highest paid female supermodel, and she has an annual salary of about $22 million. Now, the second paid highest male model makes $1.4 million, so pretty similar to the highest paid male model. You have Sean O'Pride, the highest paid male model, making about $1.5 million a year, and you have David Gandy, the second highest paid male model, making about $1.4 million a year. But when you compare the second highest paid female model, which I'm going to butcher this last name, but I believe it's Budchin, is pronounced Budchin? Not Butchin, but Budchin. Well, she makes about $17 million. So you have the 2 highest earning female supermodels, one making about $22 million, one making $17 million per year, and then you compare that to the 2 highest paid male supermodels, one making $1.5 million and one making $1.4 million. Now, nobody seems to be outraged that in modeling, women models make 20 times what the men models make. Nobody seems to be outraged by that. And the point is, you shouldn't be outraged. And it's because if I'm buying tickets to a runway show, I would rather see a beautiful woman than a man. And actually, statistically, even straight women and gay men, if they're going to a runway show, they're actually going there to see the women. They're not necessarily going there to see the men. And because of that, because people are buying tickets and buying merchandise from these female supermodels, that is why these female supermodels make more than male supermodels. As for me personally, I have never worked in any industry that I wasn't selling something or I wasn't a business owner. That is literally all I have ever done. I've either been in sales or I've ran my own companies. Now, by the time I was like 23, 24 years old working a sales job, I had a base salary of about $150,000, and I was getting commission checks that were huge. I got a commission check one time that was $40,000. However, I had a counterpart, a guy working next to me. His base salary was $500,000, and he would get commission checks for 80 to 100 grand. Now, I never once complained about this pay disparity. I never once said, oh, well, he makes more because he's white and I'm being paid less because I'm black. To me, it was quite simple. If I wanted to make more money, I would just go have to produce more revenue. When you're in sales, your job is specifically tied to revenue. In other words, you're paid a percentage based on how much you bring in. So let's say that I would make my company $500,000. They would be happy to pay me a base salary of 150 grand and maybe 40 or 50 grand in commissions. So they pay me 200,000. I make them 500,000. That means I'm actually making them $300,000 per year. But the guy working next to me, and yes, he happened to be making more money than me, and yes, he happened to be white and I happened to be black. He was making the company about $3 million per year, which is why they could rationalize paying him a salary of 500,000 and commission checks in the six-figure range. In other words, this guy as an employee was more valuable than I was, so he was getting a bigger paycheck. Now, I could have cried foul, I could have whined and complained and bitched and moaned about it, but instead, I just decided to work harder and so I would make more money. And I'm not saying that discrimination and prejudice don't exist. Of course they do. But again, you can't dictate who people choose to do business with. Just like I can't force you to watch the WNBA and I can't force you to watch male gymnastics. We all have value as human beings, but we do not all have the same value in the marketplace. Some people are going to make more money than others, and we may think it's unfair, but when we start to understand why, Simone Biles makes more money than that male gymnast whose name you forgot, when we start to think about why the athletes in the NBA make more money than athletes in the WNBA, and we realize it's because the WNBA loses $10 million a year, we can begin to put these puzzle pieces together and actually understand it's not necessarily because of discrimination and misogyny and racism or whatever. It's because you're paid based on the value you bring to the marketplace. And the market is people, and people decide where to put their money. And as long as you give people free choice, there will always be inequality because you can't force someone to like a certain thing and dislike another thing. I mentioned earlier in this video that I'm going to have a great year. After all of my taxes and expenses, I'm going to make well over $1 million this year at the ripe old age of 29. Many people watching this video will think that's unfair. But again, I have built my businesses in a way that enough people want to do business with me. There's enough revenue coming in that is a byproduct of me being good at what I do and having a wide enough audience, if you will, or wide enough customer base that'll make it possible for me to earn $1 million. There are some people that are going to make $40,000 this year and they're going to think it's unfair that I made $1 million. But on the other side, there's going to be people making hundreds of millions of dollars this year that have a much better value proposition than I do. I'm not mad at those people that are going to make $100 million this year because I understand it's probably because they either have a bigger audience or providing product and service that more people like to buy. I hope this video is helpful to you and I'll see you at the next one. Peace.